Hey everyone, it's Julie. This video is a response to Dawn Michelle over at Boho Tarot. She did a video a few months back discussing a topic that I think many of us can relate to. And I've been meaning to do my own video on the topic. And then I got sidetracked and sick and whatnot. But in any case, the video that I am referring to is the one in which Dawn Michelle talks about her struggle with curating her deck collection. And I will leave a link to that video. You should definitely check it out if you haven't. I feel like most of us have, but if you haven't, do check it out. It's a great video. And much of what she says in her video really resonated with me. So I'm going to do my own little ramble here. I have notes, so if you see me looking down, I'm going to try to follow some semblance of structure, try to be somewhat coherent, try being the operative word here, but I'm going to, just kind of talk about the struggles that I've been having and my ways of trying to manage my collection. And then I'm going to end my video in the same way that Dawn Michelle did with hers, which is I'm going to show you some of the decks that I've decided to part with. You know, whether you have 20 decks, 200, 2,000, that number that feels comfortable to us, it's so individual and it's so unique. And I know that there are people out there who have no problems with adding to their collection, and they don't feel the overwhelm, they don't feel the guilt of not using decks, and they don't quite understand why we have these struggles and why we think so much about it. And that's valid, and this video is not speaking to those people, right? This video is speaking to those of us who, for whatever reason, when we start to amass too many decks, we do feel that sense of kind of that weight, right? Either the weight of overwhelm, of having too much, having too many, not knowing which deck to work with, not even remembering what decks we have, just those kinds of stresses. And for me, I struggle with, that guilt of not, I get a deck, I use the deck for maybe a month or so, and then I'm on to the next one, and then that deck kind of gets lost in the shuffle, and that makes me feel bad because I want to use all my decks. And I am the type of person who likes to spend more of an extended time with a deck or a couple decks. I know that there are people who maybe switch out their decks every week or even every few days or every day. And that is something that I am actually dabbling in the last month or so, trying to mix it up a bit and switch things out a little more to see if that's comfortable for me. But, I am a creature of habit, and I've really enjoyed just having, again, more time with a selection of decks so that I feel like I'm savoring our time together, and I'm reconnecting and just taking my time. So, but again, I'm dabbling, I'm just playing around with that. And I think, it doesn't help that I'm an indecisive person to begin with. So if you give me more options, then the more overwhelmed I will become and the more indecisive I'll become. So that's how I am in a number of other areas of my life. And I just don't want it to get that way with my deck collection, because using decks and throwing down cards is something that I just have so much fun doing and I enjoy doing. And I don't ever want that to become a source of overwhelm for me. One thing that Dawn Michelle says in her video that really resonates with me is that some people regard her as being unsentimental. So if there's something that she hasn't used or will likely not be used, then it leaves the home. And I am the exact same way. I don't like to keep stuff just to keep stuff. I have no struggle in getting rid of things that I feel have no use in my home. And it allows me to free up more space and to live more lightly and with more intention. And so when it comes to other things, items, situations, I have no problem with letting go. Decks are a completely different thing. I have so much more trouble letting go of decks, especially the older decks where I once felt I connected so deeply with that deck and I worked a lot with it in the past, but maybe for whatever reason I haven't really picked it up in the last several months. It's hard. And I've even on a couple occasions have put up a few decks for sale or trade just to change my mind like the next day and be like, no. Never mind. I want to keep these. With newer decks, I've recently kind of found that I am able to very quickly gauge whether this is a deck that I want to keep or not. It's really just the ones that I've had some history with, right? And I guess it's just the questioning of, okay, is it that it's really time for our relationship to end, or is it that I just need to make the time to use the deck and reconnect with it? This is going to maybe sound a little weird to many of you, but sometimes I for some reason get stuck on this kind of romanticized notion. And I think maybe it does relate back to, again, living more lightly and intentionally. But I kind of have this romanticized notion of having, say, just 5 or 10 decks, right? 5 or 10 of my hallmark decks, my ride or die, my tried and true. These are the ones that I know so deeply and we are so intimate, and that's all I need, And yeah, no, that's not happened yet. And I don't know that it ever will. And even just more recently, I have found that, I am so quick to fall in love with a deck, buy it, and then I'm over it. So it's like that dopamine rush is gone, it's over, and that's just not a habit that I want to keep cultivating. It's just not. Now I'm going to talk about some of my methods for trying to cull my collection. And these are certainly not hot off the press or anything. I'm sure other people have made similar suggestions. They might be useful to you, they might not. But they have been useful to me, some to a far more successful degree than others, but hey, this is still a work in progress, right? So one of the methods that I use is when I get that urge to purge, right? And I have my inventory of decks that I'm looking at, and I'm undecided about a deck that I've had for a while, I ask myself, is this the first time that I have put this deck in the undecided pile? And since deciding to keep it from the last time I culled my collection, how much did I use it? Did I even use it at all? And if it's something where I just really haven't used it, I did not pick it up in that time, and it's been more than once that I have really been undecided on that deck, then I feel like that is something to consider. Another thing that I do is I go onto YouTube or I go onto Instagram and I look at walkthroughs and first impressions of a deck that I already have and that I'm undecided about. I go onto Instagram and I look at posts of that deck. And I gauge whether doing so like rekindles my excitement for that deck. Do I want to then run right up to my collection and grab that deck right away and start playing with it? If not, then maybe, again, it's time to rehome that deck. Another thing that I ask myself is, if something happened to this deck, say one of my cats shat on it, or I spilled coffee all over it and it's completely ruined, how much of a hurry would I be in to repurchase that deck if I could? So that's another way I kind of gauge how much I'm invested in that deck and whether I can let it go and live or not. Another mindset that I try to practice that's indirectly related to managing my collection is that, say I do decide to sell some decks and they're just not selling. And usually the case is because they are mass market decks that are pretty affordable, and so people can just go onto Amazon and buy them brand spanking new. So if for that reason I cannot sell a deck, then I don't hold on to that deck because I feel like it's a waste of money and I can't recoup some of that cost. I make the choice to still find a way to rehome the deck, whether it's just to give it away or to donate that deck. And I know that financially that is not something that everyone can afford to do, and I totally get that. I do have that privilege to be able to make that choice. But for those of you who are able to practice, maybe practice that kind of mindset of letting go of the idea that you have to make that money back or it's a waste. The book that really helped me with this is Goodbye Things by Fumio Sasaki. And it's a book on minimalism. And he's pretty hardcore. He's pretty hardcore with his minimalist life. And I'm not about that life, but there are just so many things that he talks about in that book. And this idea of, having to make that money back that he spent, or as much of it back that he spent as he can. He talks about that. The one in, one out rule, which seems to be popular among people who try to keep to a smaller collection, that is something that I do practice loosely. I am not so strict in that, if a deck comes in, then one must go out. I don't want to just be pressuring myself to get rid of a deck when I love everything in my collection. That is not the point, but I do try to keep in mind of having that balance. If I'm bringing a lot of decks in, then okay, can I reassess what are the decks that I'm just truly not using, and what's the likelihood that I probably will not use that deck in the future? Can I rehome that deck to make space for these other great decks coming into my collection? One more recent strategy that I have decided to adopt in an effort to maintain my collection is that I have stopped asking for decks as birthday presents or Christmas presents. Because I have found that, again, it goes back to that kind of odd sentimentality. For whatever reason, even though, and I really only ask for decks from my sister and Matt, and they would have no problems with me rehoming the deck. They know how I am, right? They know how I am, so they wouldn't have any problems with it. And yet, I still find it much harder to let go of that deck. And I feel bad about it. And so I have just decided I'm not going to ask them to buy me any decks. And that I think that will also help me to be able to let decks go. That's just one less thing that holds me back. Now I have just finished another round of Deck-Culling, and I did employ the KonMori method of spark joy, which Dawn Michelle also discusses in her video, and she said it wasn't so helpful for her. But for me, and for those of you who don't know the kind of KonMori spark joy method, it's the whole idea of picking up the item, picking it up, holding it, looking at it, and asking yourself, does this spark joy? And if it does, then by all means keep it. If it doesn't, then it is time to consider letting that item go. My way of kind of exercising this method, I was more brutal. I was more brutal and cutthroat about it, really balls to the wall with it. So it wasn't so much, me picking up a deck and like, oh, does this spark joy? Well, yes. I mean, I like all of my decks. There's a reason why I purchased these decks, because there's something about each of them that does spark that joy. So for me, it has to be more than that. And so kind of my measuring stick is, okay, not only does it spark joy, but do I love this deck? I mean, does this deck immediately make me feel giddy, or is it just, oh yeah, no, I like this deck. No, I really like this deck. I have no problems working with it. It's totally my jam. Like, no, it's fine. That's not good enough. I've got to love it. And that's kind of helped me to choose some decks that I am going to part with. And I think that some of you might be a little surprised with a couple of these decks, because a couple of them are decks that I've shown in recent videos, and I've said that these are awesome decks and I really like them. But again, it comes back to this recent pattern of mine that I want to squash, which is just that quick falling in and out of love. Like it fizzles so quickly. And I need to stop doing that. I really do. So I am going to show you the decks that I have decided to let go. If you are interested in buying one of these decks, do let me know. I will put my email down in the description box. Please email me. Do not drop a comment in my YouTube, because I am not getting YouTube notifications that I've received comments. So please email me, and that way I can also see the time that you've emailed me, and I will be just ordering on a first come, first serve basis on whoever wants that deck. And we can chat about it. You want the deck? You have 24 hours. And then after that, it goes to the next person who has requested the deck. So, all right, let me start with tarot. Again, a couple of these might be a little surprising. First one, the Ellis deck. I know, like, why am I like this? Okay, so this deck, I think this is a perfect example of just within a matter of what, like a month or two, just the flames have cooled. And so I still think this deck is awesome. But, I look at it and if I ask myself, would you be all right letting this go? Absolutely. I can say pretty comfortably, yeah, I can let this deck go and be okay with it. So I think that's a sign that this deck can go. Yeah, I was a little bit surprised by, having that feeling when I kind of picked it up and looked at it. But it is what it is. Another deck that I have discussed in recent video, the Guardian Angels Tarot. Now, this deck, I did trim, just so you know. I did trim off the gold gilding. Some of it was starting to chip anyway. I think trimming just makes it more manageable size-wise, so it's a little bit smaller, but this is how the backs look. And I decided to edge the different, I edged the major arcana and the different suits in corresponding colors to what you see on the front. So that's what that looks like. And again, a great deck. I have no problems with this deck. I enjoyed using it, when was it? January. It's one of those things where I picked it up and I asked myself, are you okay with letting this go? Like, do you love this deck? Love it, love it, love it so much? No, not really. I like it. But it feels it feels like an affirmation deck to me, and I don't necessarily need another affirmation deck. I already have one that I like better. So this is also up for sale. And here's the book. I don't think I even used this book really. It's like the cover, I don't know, I don't think you can see it, but there's like glitter, there's sparkle on these covers. And let us not look at that name. Just ignore that. But this is a great deck. A great deck. Okay, the next tarot deck is the Everyday Tarot by Bridget Esselmont. This deck, there's nothing wrong with this deck. Again, all of these decks, there's nothing wrong with them. But I use this for kind of like a travel deck. It's a great mini deck, and I love the simplicity of it. I do enjoy the color scheme, but again, if I'm going to use kind of like a mini travel, I do have my Llewellyn, and I think I would much prefer to have that be my travel deck. So I really don't need this deck, and I haven't used it all that much, honestly. But it's a great little deck. I don't have the annoying box that it came with, and it really is kind of a safety hazard, honestly. I've heard of people who've cut themselves trying to like get this deck out of that crappy plastic thing. But I have everything else. You know, I have the book, the little guidebook, and I have the two informational spread cards, and I will also include a bag for it. So, Everyday Tarot. Another tarot that does not have the tuck box with it. I think the tuck box came damaged. But I will give you the bag, or include the bag, is the Halloween Tarot. I think that when I talked about this deck before, here are the design cards. When I talked about this deck before, I think I said that I liked it and that it was just super cute, but after maybe a week or so, I was kind of done. And I think that probably was a sign, even though they're just some cards that I really, really love. And I like this one. I love this card. And I think it is a cute deck. Certainly an easy reader. The thing I love the most about this deck is the cat. Is that enough to keep this deck otherwise? The cat, honestly, the cat doesn't sustain me enough to keep this. And so that's why I'm letting this one go. But as you can see, it's in great shape, barely used, really, just during that one Halloween. So there is that. And the little white book. And like I said, the bag. So that's it for tarot. Now on to Oracle and Lenormand. So the only Oracle deck, once again, no box. I think the tuck box got crushed, or it just wasn't in the greatest of shape. And so I have a bag. These are nice bags too, so just keep that in mind. This is the Oracle of Echoes. Once again, freaking awesome deck. I just don't pick it up anymore. Like I really this is a deck that was kind of in that undecided pile a few times around because in the beginning when I first got this deck, I used it all the time and I really connected with it. But I have found that I just don't really use it anymore. I am not called to use it anymore. It's beautiful. And it gives great messages. It has great keywords on it. I just think it's time. I think it's time for someone else to enjoy it. Really is a great deck. So there is the Oracle of Echoes. Here's the pouch. The pouch is perfect, isn't it? Like, come on. Isn't that amazing? Okay, so there's that. Now, the rest are Lenormand. First one I'll show you is the Gilded Reverie, the expanded edition. There's, again, you know, this deck is great. I have other Lenormand decks that I gravitate towards more. And if I'm being honest, I think, you know, there are a couple of cards, like image-wise, that are not my favorite. So, and you know, the size is okay. I don't really care, but yeah, the images are beautiful. I'm ready to pass this on. Now, I will say that there is a defect in the little guidebook, which is that when I got the deck, these two pages here were like stuck together at the spine. And so when I tried to like kind of separate them so that I could read, it did rip a little bit. I don't know if you can see that. So some of the text has been kind of, some of the text you can't really read at the very base of the spine. You can still figure out what the text is saying though, even though some of the words are missing some letters, you can still figure it out. So I'm just, you know, and I'll account for that in the price of the deck as well. So there is the Gilded Reverie expanded edition. So this is the one with all of the extra cards in it. It has extra man, extra woman, and then like, I want to say a good, 6 extra cards. The other one is the Enchanted Lenormand. This was another one of those like undecided. So if this one doesn't sell, then I guess I won't be too upset about it. But I don't, for whatever reason, I just don't use this one all that much. But this woman, Kathleen Matthews, she is just fantastic with whatever she does. So this little guidebook, it's really good. The deck, I have edged it in green to match the fronts and the backs, but it's in great condition because, again, I didn't really use it all that much. It's really, really pretty. And it does have an extra gentleman and an extra lady card. And I think it has a number 37 card, I want to say. Yes, this one right here. So beautiful deck, really nice size. I have the original packaging here. This is also available if you're interested. And then last one is another Halloween Samhain themed deck. It's the Vintage Samhain Lenormand. And this deck is really pretty. I do love the aesthetic of this deck. It's got that old school vintage feel. And my issue with it is just that I have bad eyes. And so some of these cards, it's just a little hard for me to kind of make out. But I know that other people don't have that problem, and they photograph well. They take great video and great photographs. But for some reason, my eyes, like, you know, for this one, my eyes kind of have a little bit of trouble. So yeah, this is a great little Lenormand deck, but I think I've decided I'm just going to maybe make my own Halloween Lenormand. So there is that, and it comes in this plastic hard shell case there. And that's it. Those are the decks that I am going to rehome. So again, let me know via email if you are interested, and we can have a chat about it. And again, if you are wanting to purchase one or more of these decks, you have 24 hours to do so via PayPal. And yeah, shoot me an email. If you're also struggling with curating your collection, do drop a comment, let me know. Love to chat with you about it. And maybe you have some suggestions for me, other things that I can try to keep my deck collection down. So hope you enjoyed. Hope all is well. I will see you in the next video. Take care.